Hey, we are back again for another edition of 5 Minute Football. This is Mike Waxman with College Football Focus. Today we are welcoming in the always entertaining Jake Crain from Crain Company. Their show comes on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on YouTube, and it is definitely worth a watch if you want to know the most about sports in general, certainly college football, betting, and just overall hilarity. So, Jake, how are you doing?
Man, first off, thanks for that intro. I always like having my wife in the room. She's not in here right now, but when I get introed on shows, we're like, yeah, he's always entertaining. Yeah, she's the one you definitely want to ask about that. But no, man, great to be back on. And I mean, we're right around the corner from toe, meat, and leather. I can to quote Bill Walton, I can smell the sounds, and I can taste the thoughts right now. It's a great time.
Yes, definitely. It's 2 weeks from this Saturday, and we'll be hunkering down in front of the
Can't wait.
TVs and all that stuff, and it is glorious. We're going to talk a little about the SEC today. First thing, everyone seems to be talking. This is the year for Lane Kiffin. They've been close the past few seasons. Haven't quite gotten over the hump. The schedule looks like it's pretty manageable. Could Ole Miss be a team that maybe people aren't talking about enough, not just for the playoff, but maybe an outside contender for the national title?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think when we're talking about, is this the year for Ole Miss? They haven't ever won the SEC. They tied for the West in 2003 with LSU, but they didn't play in the SEC championship game. So that's first to check off the list. I do think they can do that. You brought up schedules. While I don't think there's an easy schedule really in major college football, especially in the SEC, there are lighter and heavier schedules. Ole Miss really did get a lighter schedule, but I think these high expectations are legitimate for the main reason of this Ole Miss team is finally balanced, right? I mean, what Ole Miss has been a one-trick pony in the past. They can beat you one way. That's just to try and turn it into a track meet and see if Lane can outthink you on a couple big plays and they can just outscore you, as opposed to doing what the best teams do, what championship teams do, and that's being able to win in multiple ways. Sometimes not even the way you want to win, but the way the win has to present itself. I think when you look at what they did on the front seven defensively, bringing in these pieces, now they can win games 23-20. Now they can win games 17-14. If it needs to be a rock fight and it may not, be the sexiest game offensively, Ole Miss now has the depth, capability, maturity, and patience. And that includes the coaching staff and Lane Kiffin, who I think has taken a next step in his evolution as the head coach. So, yes, my biggest worry for Ole Miss is how they can actually handle expectations when they're legitimate, when there actually is a reason for the rhyme. There actually is a logical and rational path for Ole Miss to not only make the college football playoff, but to have a chance to win the Southeastern Conference in a year where I think more teams can win the Southeastern Conference than we've had in a while. So to answer your question, yes, I think on multiple fronts it can be the year for Ole Miss, whether that just be conference goals or whether that be national goals. That's because they're a team. They're versatile, which the second best tility behind fertility is versatility. Don't ever forget that.
And certainly teams that win are usually good in the trenches on both sides. Like you said, they went
Have to
out and
be.
got guys. They'll
Yeah.
be able to get after the passer. They fortified a few things on the offensive line, and I really like them.
Well, let's not forget too. I just want to make sure. I don't think people realize how good Ole Miss was last year on defense. They
Yeah,
finished number one in the SEC in turnover margin. They finished top three in the SEC in backfield disruption rate on defense, which is one of the biggest stats that there is that nobody talks about. Because if you're disrupting things in the backfield, that hurts the run game, it hurts the pass game, it hurts the play action game, it hurts the trick play game, it hurts any play outside of a screen that is designed to give you a little bit of wherewithal on that offensive line to be able to break through. So this Ole Miss team, I'm telling you, man, they're as close to the Mega Rangers they've ever had.
it should be fun because Lane is always has a few tricks up his sleeve. Um, First year members, Texas, Oklahoma, two blue bloods come into the SEC, make it even more ridiculously deep. Texas obviously is coming off of a college football playoff appearance. Sark has an even deeper roster, although they were dealt a blow when it was learned today. CJ Baxter's out for the year with a
Yeah.
knee injury. So that's going to put more emphasis on Jaden Blue and probably the freshman Jarrett Gibson. So that's a little bit of a hit, but they seem to have enough veterans You both everyone's talking about Texas. I don't know if enough people are talking about Oklahoma in year three, Brent Venables. But do you think both of them hit the ground running, or do one of them maybe struggle a little bit?
Well, I think people are talking about Oklahoma. I just don't think it's what Oklahoma fans want to hear. When you look at the circumstance of what this year is, and when you look at Texas and Oklahoma, if right now you gave me the choice to buy either Texas or Oklahoma for the next 5 years, who will do the best over the next 5 year span? I don't think you'd be crazy to pick Oklahoma. I think it's pretty even. But if you were telling me, hey, Jake, year one, who's going to do better? Well, I can look at the math problem of year one and give you an answer I feel pretty good about. I think Texas does have a better roster than Oklahoma going into this year specifically. That's not even controversial when you look at Oklahoma breaking in a new quarterback who's got a bright future in Jackson Arnold. They're having to replace the whole offensive line, not with young guys, but kind of mosh posh from the transfer portal. They got a hell of an O-line coach there in Norman. So I don't think they'll be bad, but you have to play together as a unit to develop chemistry, and that O-line needs time. When you look at Texas, they're really good up front on the offensive line. They're returning their quarterback. They got more weapons than we've sent to Ukraine on the outside, even after losing what they lost with AD and Xavier and a couple other guys. They've really reloaded there, and their schedule's better than Oklahoma's. I mean, when you look at the daunting schedule that Oklahoma has to go through in conference, right? Compare that to Texas's. Yes, Texas does have to play Michigan out of conference week 2, but they avoided a lot of landmines when you compare it to Oklahoma, who has more problems on the roster, a tougher schedule. Therefore, I think you're going to get a lesser result when compared to Texas. And we don't make our predictions until the end of fall camp. I need to know who gets hurt, who wins what job, and who gets arrested. But right now, it's going to be tough for me to have either Texas or Oklahoma in the SEC championship game for me.
There you go. I think a lot of people are saying Texas, and I've heard a few kind of go that way, that they may not make it at the expense of Ole Miss, who we've already talked about, or maybe the next team up, Kalen DeBoer. I think a lot of people thought with the legend retiring, Nick Saban riding off into the sunset, Alabama was going to take a little bit of a dip. But just about everything Kalen DeBoer has done to this point has been, I don't want to say a home run, but definitely an extra base hit. I mean, they're recruiting lights out. It sounds like guys are taken to the offense. The defense should be pretty good. What are your thoughts on Kalen DeBoer? Do you think that the people who felt maybe Alabama might be in for a little bit of a dip for the first year or two, do you think they're going to be disappointed?
Well, I mean, we haven't played a game on the field yet. I mean, it's all still kind of honeymoon phase right now. And listen, to anybody who thought Alabama was just going to fall off a cliff in recruiting, look, Alabama's always recruited pretty well. They recruited pretty well under Mike Shula as well. Nick Saban just catapulted them into the elite stratosphere of
Mhm.
recruiting, where they were turning over number one class after number one class. And Kalen DeBoer, I think they got the number 2 class right now. He's not doing great in state. We'll see that how that goes down the stretch. You know how much that affects him. But this all gonna what I've said about Coach DeBoer, he's a hell of a coach. His tenure, I think, is going to be defined by the level of freak out that you see from Alabama fans the first time something, which it inevitably does in a college football season, goes wrong. Because when it would go wrong for Nick Saban, well, he had all this equity built up, not only just in Alabama, but for college football. So if they lost a game, Texas beat them last year. Yeah, there was some panic, but it was Nick Saban. He's going to fix it. He's the greatest of all time. Kalen DeBoer doesn't have that equity built up with Alabama fans. So how is he going to react when they overreact the first time something goes wrong? That's why I've continued to say I think Jalen Milroe's biggest contribution to Kalen DeBoer's success may be in the locker room as opposed to on the field. I think Jalen's a dog on the field. He's going to put up big numbers, but he's going to be able to keep that locker room intact and in communication and in a good way with that coaching staff, because he's kind of the arbiter between, and he's bought into what Kalen DeBoer is doing. So, yeah, it would take multiple years of mediocrity for Alabama to slip to a point where we're like, oh, man, they're kind of back down to reality in recruiting. We got to see what happens on the field, because that's where it matters the most. But again, I just give kudos to Kalen DeBoer for following the guy. I mean, you always want to be the guy that follows the guy that followed the
Right.
guy. You don't want to be the guy that followed the guy. So
Definitely.
we'll see how it pays off.
Yeah, and they've got a couple of landmines too. So there are some potential for some things to go wrong. And you're right. How people react to that, that'll kind of be a little
Yeah, it's a
bit of a
high
barometer
standard.
for them.
That's they've
Mhm.
been eating filet mignon for a minute over there.
Yes, they have. And I guess last thing, there are tiers, obviously, in the SEC. Georgia is the top dog, and then Alabama's right up there. You can put Texas, you can put a couple others. Who are maybe some teams that aren't getting enough publicity that maybe could knock things kind of sideways if they just get a couple of breaks, maybe a little bit of schedule luck, totally healthy? What are a couple of teams that would not shock you if they were in the SEC championship game?
Outside of the five that we talk about, Georgia, Texas, Bama, Ole Miss, Missouri, I think Tennessee, just because I think Nico has a chance in this system with his physical ability to really take off this year. And what Tennessee has done is they have adequate depth along the offensive line and the defensive line now, which allows them to run that warp drive system, that warp speed. Let's go as fast as humanly possible. And now we don't have to worry as much because we do have quality backups we can put in there if it does get kind of elongated as we get into the second half and maybe we're a little bit more worn down than we have been in the past. So I think Tennessee, again, when you look at the way that team's made up, they get some tests early that Nico needs to survive. He's going to make mistakes because he's a young quarterback. The question is, will they be able to survive them? They got NC State early, a game in Charlotte, which is going to be fantastic. Really, I think one of the more underrated out-of-conference games we're not hearing a ton about from other people. Then they get Oklahoma on the road. Oklahoma's first SEC game. Good matchup for them to be able to go out there and get Nico lathered up on the road and see him operate. LSU's fascinating because there's no way the offense will be as good as it was last year with the pieces they lost. But you also know the defense won't be as bad as it's been the past couple of years with what they've brought in, including Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator from Missouri, who I'm very, very high on. I find that team fascinating. There may be a little bit dip, like I said, on the offensive end, but will the rise up or the come up on the defensive end make them a more balanced overall team? I think that will, which makes them dangerous. Auburn's interesting, but I don't see Auburn ceiling past 9 wins. Could they knock somebody off and maybe cause a problem on the road at Missouri? A game that if Missouri loses could keep them out with the way their schedule's made up. But I tell you, I'm just happy at the top of the league. There's an actual decent amount of parity. This is the first time in a long time that I can remember at least 4 teams that I legitimately feel good about can win it. Probably 5 if you add Missouri in there. So it's going to be a great year. And I'll tell fans this. Just because you have the best conference doesn't mean you're going to get the most teams in the 12-team playoff, because the better teams you have in the conference, the more of them, the more carnage is there's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's going to be a lot more 9-3s, right? And then 10-2s in the league this year, which may be the difference in a 4th Big Ten team making the college football playoff and only 3 SEC teams making the college football playoff.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of cannibalization. And this year,
Yep.
maybe with the 2 newcomers, maybe more than ever. So that
Not going to help.
Definitely something to watch. So are you fading Missouri just a little bit? They've got a lot of buzz behind them, and they've got Brady Cook. They've got a really good running attack and a good schedule. Or do you just think there's enough in their way that there are enough teams ahead of them that they would need a little more help?
Well, if we're looking at overall win totals, anything over 9, and if it's 9.5, I'm taking the over there. Will Missouri be able to recreate exactly what they did last year? I think it's going to be a little bit tougher. The defense, I need to see it. I need to see it in person, live action on the field. I need to see them run around. I need to see them use their hands up front, how they're able to get off blocks, base blocks, zone blocks, gap scheme blocks, things like that. I'm not writing them off. I just think they may be a team that has a really good record that doesn't end up being a really good team.
Right. And then that happens, and a lot of people say, "Well, why didn't we get in? We're 10-2." It's like, well,
Look, after what they did with Florida State last year, you just better hope
yes,
your quarterback's healthy at the end of the year. That's what you
true.
better start off
That is
hoping.
true. Great stuff. Thanks again for coming on. If people want to follow you, what are your socials, and kind of hype the show again?
Look, it's really easy. I only know 4 things, and they all start with F. So if you enjoy old school sports shows, you enjoy talking football, just really kind of sports shows the way they used to be, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Daily Wire, wherever, just Google Crain Company, Crain and Company. You'll be able to find it. We go live 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Central each weekday. We take live calls. We have a live chat. If you like listening to this, I got a pretty good idea you're going to like listening to Crain Company.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. We may try to check in sometime during the season, see how things have gone,
Just let me know.
and Best of luck to you with the show, and we're just around the corner from football, so it'll be here soon.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks a lot.